Hey guys, it's me. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to share with you a little bit more about where my search for my birth family stands. I received some emails a few weeks ago from the social worker that I've been working with at Bethany Christian Services, and she corresponds with a social worker over at Holt International in Seoul. And those are the two agencies that my parents went through for my adoption. It's been a pretty heavy thing to find out, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but I just want to give you a brief history on Korea's adoption and why KADs, or Korean adoptees, are a little bit different with their adoption than other countries. So, back in the 1950s, after the Korean War, there was a couple who I fondly known as Grandma and Grandpa Holt, who saw footage of the poverty, the destruction, the number of orphans left in South Korea after the war. They were compelled to pass a special act to allow them to adopt 8 children from South Korea, because at that point international adoption wasn't really a thing. They later went on to establish Holt International, which was the first international adoption agency, which is located in Seoul. The Korean adoption basically took off after that. Let's fast forward to 1988, when Korea hosted the Olympics. The Olympics brought a lot of attention to the country. Also, its economy had increased a ton since the war. But the country also came under a lot of criticism and scrutiny for the number of children that had been exported or adopted out of the country. So basically, the statistics are, KADs made up about 60% of foreign adoptions that went to the US, averaging about 6,000 kids a year, making South Korea the world's #1 exporter of orphans. Now, it's estimated that there are over 200,000 Korean adoptees worldwide. And it's awesome that there are a lot of support groups for KADs to feel like they're part of a community, because essentially these kids were taken out of their homeland, their culture, and placed into a completely different culture, whether that was American, French, Australian. We're all over the globe. So fast forward again to today, there are a lot of KADs who are moving back to South Korea to explore their lost heritage, to discover their roots, in search for their birth family, and just to try to assimilate into Korean culture. That's also a totally different topic for a different video. So let's talk a little bit about Korean culture. The Korean culture is really conservative. It's not uncommon in America to have a child out of wedlock, to be a single parent, but in Korea, it's looked down on. Being an unwed mother with a child brings a lot of shame to you, a lot of shame to the child, and a lot of shame to the general family. A lot of Korean adoptees are given up for that reason. They're brought to adoption agencies, they're left on doorsteps in public places like theaters, the steps of police stations. So let's get into where I am in my adoption process looking for my birth family. If you watched my previous video about me starting this journey, you probably remember me telling you a little bit about my history. So if you didn't see that, let me just give you a quick refresh. I've always been interested with my adoption. I've always asked questions to my adoptive parents, who have always been very open with me. As a young child, I looked at my files. I knew that my mother was 32, my father was in his mid to late 30s. They were married. I was the fifth of 5 children. And according to my paperwork, the contraceptive failed. I was a surprise child. They couldn't afford another mouth to feed, so they gave me up for adoption. I will turn 34 in November. I have believed this my entire life. Why else wouldn't I believe this? Let's go back about 3-4 weeks ago. I had been in correspondence with the Bethany social worker, and she emailed me that she wanted to talk on the phone. She had gotten my paperwork back in January, and then everything went sideways in the world, and so things kind of got pushed on the back burner. But she emailed me and said that she wanted to talk on the phone. I called her after work, and she said, I have a mixed bag of news. She said, the good news is that we have an address for your birth mother, Mrs. Jang. The bad news is that your father, Mr. Kim, passed away in 2007. So we have contacted Mrs. Jang. We contact her 3 times. If she doesn't respond after the 3rd time, that's it. She said that they had reached out 1 time so far, and they hadn't received anything yet. But she usually heard back after the 2nd or the 3rd attempt. After getting that email and talking to the social worker, I had a lot of feelings. One, I felt really guilty. I felt bad that I hadn't searched for my birth family sooner. Like, could I have met my birth father? I felt sad that I was 33 years old and finally looking for my family. I also felt really anxious, and I think that anxiety and worry were probably the predominant feelings. The next day I had to go to work, and it was literally the only thing I could think about, was what happens if she doesn't want to meet me? What happens if she doesn't respond? How am I going to deal with this? I really don't want to share this with people, which is why it's been a few weeks since I got this information, and I'm now just sharing it because this wasn't really, I guess I wasn't really prepared for my birth mother to not want to meet me because they were married. There's no shame, in my opinion, there was no shame in giving your child up for adoption because you couldn't afford the child. However, that is a little bit different in Korean culture. So I spent the next day feeling really down, really scared, which is not an emotion that I feel very often. So it was very unsettling, and it made me really, really anxious. Well, about 72 hours later from having that phone conversation with the social worker, my anxiety turned to a lot of confusion. I got an email at 6 a.m. on a Friday morning that the social worker had heard back from the Holt social worker. Turns out Mrs. Jang contacted the Holt social worker and by phone and told her that she had in fact been married to my father, Mr. Kim, and that they had indeed had 5 children. However, the 5th child was a son born in 1983. I was born in 1986. She then also told the social worker that she and Mr. Kim were divorced in 1990. So you can understand why I was really confused. I don't think I've experienced speechlessness much in my life, maybe like 3 times before this. And as I was reading the email, I think my face just went blank. I reread the email, I turned to my husband, I told him what was going on, and then I immediately called my best friend, who is also a KAD, and told her what was going on. Another thing that Mrs. Jang mentioned to the social worker was that she was willing to take a DNA test. So the Bethany social worker asked me if I was willing to take a DNA test, and I told her I needed some time to process things and I would get back to her after the weekend. So going back to the conversation that I had with my good friend, we came up with 2 scenarios. One, someone had used the family information to have me in the maternity clinic and just used their names and their situations and whatnot. The other scenario was that Mr. Kim had an affair while poor Mrs. Jang was at home raising a family, the youngest being a 2-year-old. Also, you should know that divorce in Korean culture is not good. It kind of goes along in the same category as having a child out of wedlock. Those were the 2 scenarios that we came up with. They could be totally wrong. But again, this was something that I really needed to process and that I really was unsure that I wanted to share with people. But this account isn't about all the good things, and the ending is very, very different from what I imagined. But like that's what this journey is about. It's about sharing the ups and the downs and the surprises and the things going sideways, because life isn't about rainbows and butterflies at the end of the tunnel. So as of now, my hair samples are in the hands of Holt International. They are running my DNA tests against Mrs. Jang's, and also she convinced the youngest son to also take the DNA test. We needed his DNA to see if indeed Mr. Kim was my father, and if I have any half siblings. I don't know how long the DNA tests take, but rest assured, I definitely will be sharing those in another video when I get the results. So basically, I've been working through a lot of emotions. Feelings of confusion, obviously. My anxiety has gone down a lot. And I'm basically to the point of like just accepting whatever the DNA test results show. There are times where I feel really alone. I was really angry when I found out that my paperwork wasn't what I thought it was, because I felt like I had been lied to for almost 34 years. Now I can't definitively say that that's true because we don't know the DNA tests. We don't really know what's going on. But aside from being confused and shocked, I was very, very upset. Because I had built this whole thing up in my mind that just still doesn't really even exist. But I feel like I've worked through a lot of the anger and the confusion and some of like the loneliness that I feel. I've met some other KADs and looked into like KAD support groups, and like being part of something that's bigger than that's bigger than just my bubble of other Korean adoptees that I know. It's been a cool thing to realize that there are other KADs out there, a lot of other KADs out there who feel the same way that I do. So thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for coming along on this journey with me. I'm trying my best to be transparent and honest with viewers, but also with myself. A lot of boxes being unpacked, a lot of rabbit holes being explored, and just a lot of emotions that I've had to work through, which again is why I haven't posted anything about this yet, because I've had to process a lot of this stuff for myself. But right now I feel pretty confident in whatever the turnout is. You know, I'm excited to see what the DNA results are. I'm excited to see what the 23andMe results are in a few weeks. And I guess whatever they are, that's what they are. And I guess at that point, I'll make the decision of, do I want to keep pursuing trying to find my birth mother and my birth family, or is this where my journey ends, and am I okay with that? But that's still totally to be foreseen, and I don't feel any pressure to make up my mind right now. That's something that that's a bridge that I can cross once I get there. Thanks for tuning in today, guys. I hope that this gives you a little bit of insight into what's happening with my journey, and I appreciate you following along. If you have people in your life who you think could benefit from this video, feel free to share it. Don't forget to like it if you did, and I would love it if you subscribed. We'll talk to you soon.